snowshoeing. Yeah, I can see that too. Which is a funny thing. They probably what she was
Got it.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Going to first talk about the snowstorm. And I just want to say to all New Yorkers, I know how frustrated people are. I'm frustrated too. I'm frustrated as a New Yorker who was stuck in traffic like so many other people were. I'm frustrated as mayor of the city that for so many reasons, people didn't get what they should have had last night. Look, again, I have found a long time ago New Yorkers like straightforward explanations. They don't like to be toyed around with. In truth, this was a kind of perfect storm. It emerged bigger and later than anyone expected. Obviously affected the whole tri-state area in a very severe way. We had exceptional dynamics like the 20-car pileup on the George Washington Bridge, knocking out the outbound lanes of the George Washington Bridge, something I can't remember ever happening before. We had the early time of year and the impact on the trees and an extraordinary number of trees falling, something that hasn't typically happened in a lot of our storms. But all that gets back to a core reality, which is the timing. So we went into Wednesday night with estimates from the National Weather Service in the 1 to 2 inches of snow range. That's not a snowstorm that any of us would be afraid of. That's not a snowstorm where we're going to, use all the emergency measures and tell people don't go to work and stay off the roads and all. We've had, I remind you, a lot of us, have been through this together. The biggest snowstorm in New York City history, 28 inches, 29, whatever it was in the final analysis. There are times when we need to tell people, don't even think about going to work, just clear the roads, leave room for sanitation. Wednesday night, we had no indication of that. Thursday morning, we had no indication of that. I said earlier, I referred to what has typically been the 11 a.m. National Weather Service report. It turns out that the timing yesterday was later even than usual in terms of when we got the report. It was 12:36. Yesterday, there was the first indication of 3 to 5 inches of snow. And again, normally 3 to 5 inches of snow would not have posed this kind of problem. It ended up coming exactly at the wrong time, basically concentrated as the rush hour was beginning. Heavy, wet snow, heavier, faster than anyone expected. So there are a lot of reasons why things ended up the way they did. But that said, we are trying to learn some lessons and figure out what we can do better. So the first thing we're going to do is there will be a full audit review of everything that happened with the city agencies. We're also going to sit with our state partners because everyone is connected here, MTA, Port Authority, everyone. We all have to work it through together. Deputy Mayor Houlihan's timing is impeccable. The first deputy mayor and his team at the Office of Operations will lead that review. I think we're going to find that a lot of this was exceptional and unusual and some of it beyond our control, but we're also going to find areas where we can do better. The central concern I have is that we have, as a city, done well when we can get information out to people early and in a clear way. We don't do as well when we don't get information to folks. This one is tough because the information broke so late, and I do think in retrospect, we could have tried to say at 1 p.m., let's say, we're headed for a much bigger situation, go home immediately, leave work early. That might have helped. I think, unfortunately, to some extent, the die was cast by that point. People had already brought their cars into the city. I think it had a helpful effect, but I'm not sure it would have averted the essence of what we went through. So we want to do that review because we need to do better, but we also understand the essence of all this is having good information on a timely basis. And unfortunately, that just was not the case yesterday. At this moment, after a very difficult time yesterday, and I'll say, I know everyone's feeling among the agencies here, we're all unhappy with what happened. But I also want to say people worked very, very hard to try and address a situation that was exceedingly difficult. The agencies, I want to give particular thanks to the NYPD and the FDNY, who spent the whole night trying to undo traffic jams and get trees out of roads under very adverse circumstances. I know sanitation was trying to do all they could do, and a lot of times the core problem was they could not get to their locations because of the traffic. They needed to go back for salt, and there was no way to get back to their resupply. So people worked very hard, very intensely. I want to say as we got in the morning, and finally as sanitation had the ability to get out into roads that were not clogged by traffic, I think they did a good job on the overnight clearing up as much as possible and making things move better this morning. We still had some issues early in the morning in the Bronx, but in the final analysis, under very, very adverse circumstances, I want to just say I think a lot of city agencies did everything they could do. But the essence of this, even if you say it's an exceedingly unusual set of events that came together, we still can't let it happen again, and we have to learn from it. We have to drill for it. It was in the final analysis just over 6 inches of snow. That should not be able to have this impact on this city, and we have to figure out a way in the future to make sure that that does not happen again. Very quickly in Spanish. Al igual que la mayoría de los neoyorquinos, me siento frustrado por los problemas del tránsito anoche. Estábamos listos para la tormenta, pero nos golpeó más fuerte y más rápido de lo previsto. Hoy nuestras calles están despejadas y vamos a aprender de lo que sucedió ayer para mejorar en el futuro. With that, I want to just say procedurally, take questions on the storm. Then I'm going to talk about DOI. We'll take some questions on that, and there may be some other questions as well.
Can you explain, and correct me if these numbers are incorrect, but I understand about a third of the plows that we had available were
A third of the plows?
plows were out and about last night. And I think the question a lot of people have, it's our understanding that yes, salting did happen as soon as we saw snowflakes. But why in the world were only a third of the plows, if that number is correct, were used last night?
Can I stop you 1 second and go to Catherine? You're going to talk about the numbers, but I want you to start everyone again because it's a whole new winter with the thing that took me a while to fully understand, that when plows can actually start plowing, because I think most New Yorkers need to hear that.
Absolutely. Is this on? So yesterday into the morning, we make our plans the day before because obviously we need to call people in. We were planning for a 1-inch event, which is going to be primarily our salt spreaders. We did add plows to that in the late morning when we start to get rumblings that maybe something else would happen. At that point in time, our staffing going into the afternoon was allowing us to go up to about 700 plows. We can, when we get very, very big, our biggest number for a blizzard would be about 1,600. So there were points in time when we were between about 350 and 700 on the plowing side, depending on how many staff we had in, because we were in 3 shifts. We were not split.
You could call them up.
They would already all had been working that day. So everybody did work that day, but some had worked midnight to 8 the day on the overnight before. Some were working 6 to 6, and some were working starting at 4 o'clock.
Yeah,
all of them worked overtime, but we were in 3 unevenly split shifts.
I just want to amplify this. So imagine you're in Catherine's shoes and you're hearing 1 inch, 2 inches, and that's salt only, or salt essentially, and then suddenly, you know, literally it's afternoon when you hear for the first time this thing has suddenly jumped up. Now, I will say one of the things we're going to work on is, and this is not a diss on the National Weather Service, they do extraordinary work, but, you know, we have been burned a few times, not because they're not trying, but because weather's unpredictable. You know, I think we're going to start being even more conservative. But even if you said, let's throw on a few more inches, you know, as Catherine said, our biggest, you know, when you have a blizzard, 20 inches, 25 inches, 28 inches, like that's when it's all hands on deck. When it's 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, you couldn't imagine something like this possibly becoming what happened yesterday. Nonetheless, we have to figure out how to make the right adjustments. Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Where exactly were you when you realized, 1, this is far worse than our expectations, and then 2, what can you do, or what should you have done to better prepare? I mean, what could have gotten you out of this?
So again, that's why I tried to give you an extensive, straightforward opening, that I think there were some limits about what we could do, honestly. And again, my job is to offer New Yorkers straight talk, not platitudes. If the fuller facts became available after 12:30 and rush hour began, and rush hour officially begins at 3:30, 4 o'clock, you know, we were already in a really bad situation. Now, that said,
Is that when you realized?
no, I will say personally, I had heard that the number went up, but per se, going up to 3 to 5 inches was not going to be a major weather event. We go through 3 to 5 inch storms all the time. It was my own personal experience. Left Gracie Mansion for an event at 6:30, and a few blocks into it, suddenly there's this crazy traffic on the FDR, and there's no other place to turn. I mean, something obviously was unusual, and I started calling everyone, and people started calling each other from their own experiences. But I think it's really important to note, the thing that I think we would have had a shot at is, with the right messaging very, very quickly, we might have been able to get some people off the road and have a better chance of clearing. The problem is, even hearing 3 to 5 inches would not have set off a sense of alarm. You couldn't have imagined what we saw. If I just said you were going to have 3 to 5 inches of snow, wouldn't in a million years have pictured what ended up really happening. We've had much worse snow and never had something like that. So this is a tough learning experience because we got something we never would have been able to predict from those numbers.
There was no way to pivot.
I think that the reason we have to do a review is, I'm sure there were some ways to pivot, but I'm trying to be honest with you. I think in essence, the die was cast. Could we have gotten better information out? I think so. Could we have made some tactical moves that improved the situation? I think so. Could we have changed the basics? Not that late is my fear. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, what happened with your commute yesterday? Where did you turn around? Did you keep going?
When I said at 6:30? Oh, I kept going, but it was ridiculous.
When did you get to where were you going?
It took I was going down to Gramercy Tavern for an event for Computer Science for All. It took like 20 or 25 more minutes than it normally would. And then going back to Gracie was another, 30, 40 minutes than it normally would have been, something like that.
Mr. Mayor, at CBS, we have been inundated with social media posts of people who are incredibly critical of the job that you did in the snowstorm. They say you were unprepared, that, you should step aside. Your reaction to those people? What do you say?
Marcia, I'm not going to dignify that question. You've been around a long time. I'm kind of surprised at you for asking a question like that. This city and this sanitation department have handled a series of major snowstorms with tremendous professionalism and effectiveness. I can't tell you how many New Yorkers, after the last big storms, acknowledged all the progress the sanitation department has made on vast, huge storms. This was a real unusual series of events. I'm not happy about it. We're going to do a full review. We're going to find ways to make it better. But I'm trying to be honest with people. I'm not going to give people an answer that says, oh, we had perfect knowledge and we could have come up with a perfect solution. Sometimes you get the knowledge you need too late to have a perfect solution. I think real people understand that.
You're basically telling people that you got the information too late, that the die was cast, and there was little that you could do at that point. Could you have said to people, listen, shelter in place, don't get on the roads until after we clear them?
If we had understood that 3 to 5 inches could result in this kind of impact, and I'll let the experts speak to it, and Polly as well. If you said to me, typical day in New York City in winter, 3 to 5 inches of snow, that's not a major snow event. I think if we had been able to understand, some of the dominoes that were falling, at some point we could have gotten out there with a much stronger message, say, stop everything, retreat, don't get on the roads and all. But I'm not sure it would have been in time. Even the information that we had gone from 1 or 2 inches to 3 to 5 inches, and again, I'm going to treat everyone here with respect and honor everyone's intelligence. If we've all experienced 28 inches, you'll understand why 3 to 5 inches doesn't put us in a state of fear. But at least, we saw something was moving. I think in retrospect, there may have been ways to say to people, beware. The thing that really would have been good, honestly, is if we had the information the night before and we told people don't go to work. That would have been the real difference maker. But what do you want to say to it?
No, I mean, absolutely. This was an incredibly difficult storm in terms of the fact that I think no one really knew that it was going to change so quickly. And it hit at a very, very challenging time right at rush hour and was coming down at 2 inches an hour. So it was at blizzard strength right at the moment when it was hitting. And it was difficult to cross all 5 boroughs, but the difference was we did keep moving in the other boroughs slowly, very slowly, and it made it possible for us to, by the late evening, be basically through Staten Island and Brooklyn and Queens. The GWB sort of clash, the crash that occurred there, we ended up having much of our equipment on the Henry Hudson, the FDR, the Bruckner, the Cross Bronx, the Sheridan, the Major Deegan, and it meant that we couldn't move, and if we can't move, we can't work. It really did take actually partnering with PD to actually do escorts and bring us the wrong way up onto some highways to be able to get up there and assist. When we brought in additional equipment in the overnight hours into the Bronx, we had to bring it sort of from the eastern side of Queens because the Triborough was still very backed up and we didn't want to have any more pieces of equipment trapped. So it was going to be a very big storm, but I think the accidents that occurred on the roads made it very difficult to recover from.
So do you think the Port Authority should have done
idea where the child was? We spoke to a dad